life a promise. I won't quit, keep going till I got it. I won't give up till I'm on top.
Hey, welcome back to another show of the Fantasy Football Plug with your host, yours truly. All right, we're going to get in today to the top 200 PPR players for the 2023 Fantasy Football Drafts. This is going to be our 21 through 40, and it is going to be a couple of plug picks in there. We're going to work our way from 40 to 21, so let's get right into it. All right, so our number 40 guy on the list today is going to be DeAndre Swift. I had a lot higher hopes for DeAndre going into the year. He was the number one back on the Lions, and then Jamal Williams came into town. Jamal played so well, and he was the guy inside the 5-yard line. So Swift kind of took a back seat in that aspect and didn't get nearly as many touches as Jamal. He was the pass-catching back. He was definitely the preferred pass-catching back out of the backfield, which does help. And the reason why he's even as high as he is on the list, because he's the pass-catching back in Detroit, and they do throw the ball a little bit. So he is definitely a player that you're going to want on your team. He has a chance to take a step back forward and become the lead back in Detroit. Not sure if it'll happen, but his skill's definitely there. They like Jamal a lot, so I'm not 100% sure how well that's going to go. But he's definitely a uber talented player who, if he can stay on the field, is a player that you're going to want in your lineup. Miles Sanders is my number 39. Miles Sanders playing on Philadelphia. He's been playing on Philadelphia, but Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, what they've done for this team to kind of build the balance that they have has got to be so scary for opposing defenses. The Eagles are so far, they are probably one of the scariest teams to play against. It's like them in Kansas City, Buffalo. Like, these are teams you dread facing because of their quarterback situation. Other players on the team are going to benefit from that, like Miles Sanders. But the Philadelphia Eagles, you really want some players on them, on your team. And Miles Sanders being the number one back in that backfield, at least right now. Kenneth Gainwell's, he's all right. But Miles will likely be the number one back next year again. He'll get some touches. He's not going to get a ton of opportunities, especially inside the 5, because Jalen Hurts and the quarterback sneak in that offense. Everybody knows it's coming every single time, and they can't stop it. So why run anything else? So Miles he's not going to be getting a ton of 1 or 2 yard looks. He'll get something at the 5, but with defense stacking boxes, knowing it's a likely run situation when they do run, it's going to be hard for him to actually push it into the end zone. We're going to move on to our number 38 guy. This is one of my plug picks. T. Higgins is such an elite receiver. And if he was on any other team, he would be just so good. He's behind Jamar Chase, so he has not a lot of chances to be uber targeted like some of these other guys. He's in a super high-powered offense. He's going to get a ton of looks at the end zone, but that doesn't mean that it's going to translate into super high fantasy stats. He's definitely going to have high fantasy stats, but the elite fantasy stats, his fantasy stats probably will not match up with his skill level. he has so much skill that if he was on any other team, he'd probably be the number one. Not any other team, obviously. If he was in Miami, he's not going to be the number one. If he's in Oakland, he's not going to be the number one. If he's in Minnesota, he's not going to be the number one. If he's in Buffalo, he's not going to be the number one. But just about any other team, he'd be the number one there. So if he's not behind Jamar Chase, which Jamar Chase is going to be ahead of him and likely staying healthy because he's young, and I mean that doesn't mean he's going to stay healthy, but I think they're going to stay healthy. They spread the ball around enough to where T. Higgins, he's getting eight targets a game. That is a solid number. Now, that's not the only number you really want to look at. He's catching the ball 14 yards down the field on his catches. He got 7 touchdowns this year, which is a super solid number in 16 games played. So he's Burrow's second favorite target, and he won't face number one cornerbacks because of Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase will take the attention unless he's not on the field. Then T. Higgins will take the attention. So T. Higgins is definitely a player that you're going to want on your team, and he's a player that is going to be solid for years to come. The Cincinnati Bengals are super young. They're built in a way to win offensively. They're a solid defense. They have a solid defense, but their offense is how they're going to win from Joe Burrow's arm and Joe Mixon's ground game. Not like Joe Mixon's some like ground and pound, just amazing back, but he can get enough done to make it so they are not just a one-dimensional team that teams can, key on the passing game. So, T. Higgins, definitely a player that you want on your team. Number 37, we're going to move on. Number 37, another player for the Philadelphia Eagles, Devontae Smith. He is, the 1B in that offense. A.J. Brown is the 1A, and I give him the 1A because he's got a couple more targets, I think, and they're downfield targets. He's a downfield kind of guy, and his talent, I think A.J. Brown is slightly more talented. Maybe not slightly. He's more talented than Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith is a very talented athlete in a different way. He's uber quick. He'll break your ankles. He's more of the Tyreek Hill, while A.J. Brown's more of the Devontae Adams. You can't stop speed, but you can cover speed. You can't cover A.J. Brown. You can't cover Devontae Smith. You couldn't cover Calvin Johnson. These guys were on a different level of skill than the quick guys. Tyreek Hill, though, he's a different athlete. He's a whole other thing. He'll burn you so bad that he doesn't even need to worry. His speed is just a whole other level. We're not talking about Tyreek, though, right now. We're talking about Devontae and the Philadelphia Eagles. We're going to move on to number 36. Number 36, Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones, I don't love him next year. I know I got him at 36. Could easily fall from here. He's still a number one on Green Bay. What's going to happen with their quarterback situation? Who knows? Aaron Rodgers is going to go trip out in the woods, figure out what he's going to do. If they got Jordan Love, I don't like it. I don't like Jordan Love. I liked him coming out of the draft. I'm a Green Bay fan, so I was interested in that draft. I was pretty happy to an extent with the Jordan Love pick. I think it was early. I think they could have went other ways with it. But Aaron Rodgers, I don't think will ever play again for the Green Bay Packers. He might play in the NFL next year. I don't think it'll be for the Green Bay Packers. That being said, that means who knows what their quarterback situation is. We know their receiver situation isn't that great. So now what? Teams are going to be able to stack boxes against a aging, declining Aaron Jones, who's now splitting carries with A.J. Dillon. And A.J. started looking better by the end of the year and looking more like, I mean, I guess it was not necessarily just the end of the year. Random times throughout the year, the team would kind of go like hot hand approach and be, here you go, here's the ball, we're going to give A.J. Dillon the ball more times this game. We're going to give Aaron Jones more times this game. And even if it was Aaron Jones getting the ball more times this game, it's what? He's got 12, 14 carries. He's not getting the ball 20 plus times a game typically. So he's always been good. I struggle to drop him too far because he always finishes right in that like back end RB1, high end RB2 range. And even having him at 36 being a back end RB1, high end RB2, if he finishes against that next year, is going to be a slap in the face. That's a slap in the face. So Aaron Jones, he's a guy that I am not afraid to pass on next year. There's too many question marks around it. As the season gets closer, we'll see. But I know I'm got at 36, but I'm not afraid to pass on him. Keenan Allen at my number 35. Keenan Allen is like, I don't get how he's still the number one in LA, in the Chargers. He's so old. He's constantly getting hurt. He can't really stay on the field. Mike Williams looks good, and he's looked good for years. But Keenan's still, when he's on the field, Keenan's the guy. And that doesn't mean a ton of targets anymore. He used to be uber targeted, but he's getting a little bit older. And, at my 35, again, this is another guy I could see dropping out of my top 40, top 50 maybe even. But as it currently sits and where he was able to finish and how high-powered that offense was and how many targets he still got, even though, each year they're going to probably start declining a little more and more. So another player who I'm not super scared to pass on is Keenan Allen. If he falls to me and I don't love everything else around me, which is not going to happen, then I'll take him. But he's not a player I'm afraid to pass on. He'll probably move down on my list a little bit. But as he sits right now, he's sitting at 35. My number 34 guy, playing for the Jacksonville Jaguars, very underrated wide receiver, Christian Kirk. He's got a ton of talent. And this guy is, if Trevor Lawrence gets it together, if that offense gets it together, and what's his name, Travis Etienne can get it together, the coaching staff can get it together, defense can give him a couple more opportunities, which is a lot of ifs. Even without that, though, he was so good. I'm just saying he has a chance to be uber elite because the talent is there. The talent is there, and if the offense is able to take a little bit of a step forward, he could really take a step forward in your fantasy team. He's a player that I am uber targeting next year. I have him at my 34. I don't expect him to be on many people's lists that high at 34. I think I'll be able to get him a little bit later than that. Maybe a 4th round, 5th round. But he's a player I wouldn't be scared to take as my wide receiver one. He's going to get likely more targets. He's going to... I do expect a step forward for Jacksonville. I don't think they're going to be some contenders or anything, but a step forward means more opportunity, which means more catches, more touchdowns, more everything, especially when you're putting the ball in an elite player's hands. We're going to move on to our number 33, who's going to be Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown. Marquise Brown's moving over to Arizona was such a good move for him. Lamar Jackson, and as good as Baltimore is, it was not, and that's if he wants stats over winning. It's a good move for him for fantasy. I should preface that. Marquise Brown is likely going to be the number one next year. DeAndre Hopkins looked good in his return, and he's still nuke. Like, DeAndre Hopkins is still DeAndre Hopkins. But he's getting older. He's borderline old. Larry Fitz did it for a while. That's kind of what DeAndre Hopkins is going to remind me of. But if you remember, as years go on, Larry Fitz became not fantasy relevant. And I'm not saying next year D-Hop is going to be not fantasy relevant, but in the latter half of the year, when D-Hop was playing, he was the, I don't know exactly, but I'm going to say he was a top 10 wide receiver. Likely even top 5. At least for a stretch, he was a top 5. And he was getting uber targeted. He was catching the ball at a super high rate. He didn't have a ton of touchdowns, but he was doing something in that offense. And Marquise Brown was out, though. Marquise Brown came back. Started getting more targets. D-Hop's production started dropping a little bit. And Marquise Brown is younger. I've always believed in Marquise Brown and his abilities. And he could definitely become somebody who is going to be a real player in this league. So, let me try to find my thing to turn this back on, if I can find it. Boom. But yeah, Marquise Brown's going to be real. Next year I'm going to be going after him, assuming, Kyler's still there and some other pieces are still there along with him. I expect all that. He'll be there. I think he'll be the number one, and he'll be getting, 8, 9, 10 targets a game, which will be a solid number. And if you pick him at 33, you'll be happy with it. Number 32, we got Ramondre Stevenson. Really great player in New England. New England still has Bill Belichick there. Their quarterback situation I don't care about as much. If they did have a good quarterback, I would like Ramondre even more. But as it sits right now, they don't really have any receivers. He can pass catch. So he's a guy who kind of burst out onto the scene this year. I got him at my 32 because I am not a huge believer still in the New England running backs. The last few years they've been better. Since Tom Brady's been gone, they've been better because Bill Belichick has had to lean on that. So I am shifting myself towards that a little bit more. But it's still Bill Belichick, and he is a master of not being predictable. He can say one thing, do another. He typically would say one thing, do another. And he's very cryptic with what he says. He said this past year that he could turn one of his running backs into a 3-down back. Profile-wise, I thought he was clearly talking about Ramondre Stevenson, which is why I wanted Ramondre this year. But like a lot of other people, New England backs are not fantasy gold. So I was able to get him in a lot of later rounds in most of the leagues. He's not going to be that this year. And he's probably not going to be a player that's in a lot of my teams because he's a New England back, and with his burst onto the scene this year, I expect him to be higher than 32 on a lot of lists. If if he's not, he will be a player that I'm kind of targeting. But if I have to jump on him, I just don't see myself being able to. We're going to move on to number 31. Number 31 is going to be Jamal Williams. He is another one of our plug picks. Jamal Williams. This guy is like, he's probably my favorite player in the league. I would say likely he is the favorite player right now of the NFL fan base. He's so fun to watch. He's so goofy. He's likable. He's a real person. You know, he doesn't fit the profile of your typical NFL player, and a lot of people like that. His play on the Key and Peele was awesome too. I'm not even gonna try to butcher the name. Why not? Tritherquix or whatever his, I don't remember what the first name was, but yeah, he had a funny little name for himself that he named himself, and he threw his little gaming world aspect into it. He's a funny guy. Yeah, he had 17 games played this year. He touched the ball 274 times. Now, he only had one target. He's a one target a game kind of guy. 16 targets, 17 games. He's not a pass catching back. It's not like he's Derrick Henry pass catching from when Derrick Henry didn't pass catch at all. So he's not going to be some huge PPR. He probably doesn't even have a chance to be the number one overall because of the lack of pass catching. He was able to finish this year with 17 rushing touchdowns. 17. Leading the league this year in rushing touchdowns by 4. And he had what? Hold on one sec. He had 57 rushing attempts inside of the 5-yard line. 57, which led the league also in that stat. And another thing that he led the league in is touchdowns inside the 5-yard line. 15. 15 of his 17 touchdowns came inside the 5-yard line rushing. Amazing. And Detroit they are so vastly improving offense. They have so many pieces coming in. They've kind of taken a little bit of the New England approach of trading away players for picks before they're gone for nothing. They got rid of TJ Hawkinson. A lot of people were like, terrible move, terrible move. Guess what? It wasn't a terrible move. He was going to be gone anyways. They got picks for him. They can use those picks for future talent or trading for other talent that you know. Like they're starting to make the right moves. They're building their offensive and defensive lines. I expect with this number 6 pick coming up, they're going to take an edge rusher. They're going to solidify their team. They already have the offensive pieces in place. If they can get a quarterback, Jared Goff is solid. But if they can get a real quarterback, which I'm sorry, Jared, but a real one, they could literally be contenders next year. They could still be contenders next year with Jared Goff. You don't have to be an uber elite quarterback to win a Super Bowl. They have a chance, albeit not a great chance, but even the world believes in them. Like, they have something like 30% of the betting money on them to win the NFC North. So make the playoffs. Make the playoffs next year. You get in the playoffs, anything can happen. And the world would be on their side. If you are a team that has forever sucked, and then you make it in, you get the Cinderella story, everybody loves you. So they're going to have the league on their side. They're going to have the fan bases on their side. They're going to be a team that could be definitely very scary if they make it into the postseason. My number 30. My number 30 guy, another one of my plug picks, Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, he only ended up having to play 15 games this year. He only had 460 passing attempts as a quarterback this year. Now his good stats. Let's go. He only had 3,700 yards passing, and he only had 22 passing touchdowns in those 15 games. Not bad, not good. He did also have 6 interceptions. He had 5 fumbles, which he lost 0 of. So he had 6 total turnovers, all interceptions. And those numbers, not great, not bad. Here's where it goes crazy to me. Not necessarily crazy, will go good. This is good. This is 66.5% completion percentage. Solid number. Here's where it goes crazy for me. 13 rushing touchdowns. He tied for second. Tied for second for rushing touchdowns as a quarterback. Amazing. Then you look at, he had 760 yards rushing. That's right up where with Josh Allen. Josh Allen's had something like 760, 762. Now, Jalen Hurts is running the ball more than Josh Allen. They both had the same there, but a lot of Josh Allen doesn't get the QB sneak 1 and 2 yarders. A lot of his running attempts, Jalen Hurts, were QB sneaks, and those are only going to get a yard or 2. So his yards per carry are a little bit skewed. It's only a 4.6. If you take away I don't even know how many attempts. I would love to have looked that up. I wish I would have looked that up. I should have looked that up. But if he would have had, like, however many rushing attempts that he had, subtract all those rushing attempts and see what his yards per carry were on plays that weren't called a quarterback sneak. And that dude, if you watched him at all, he's got legs. He ain't at 4.6 yards a carry. Dude's making people look silly. And we're going to move on to our number 29. That's Najee Harris. Najee Harris for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was such a volume guy 2 years ago. Kind of expected a step back last year. Didn't realize how big of a step back he was going to take. I think it's the opposite this year. I think people are going to undervalue him, and I think he's going to be worth taking. I was not a huge believer in Kenny Pickett until I saw him actually play. He reminds me a little bit of Joe Burrow. He does. He's got that I don't know if it might be Baker Mayfield too. So Baker, they have a similar style where they kind of run around with like a chicken with their head cut off. But the difference is Joe Burrow can get it off accurately and not lose a ton of yards, while Baker run around with the chicken with his head cut off and then lose 35 yards and with the sack or whatever, because he was not good at that. So if Kenny Pickett can be what I think he could possibly be, Najee is going to take a step forward and go back into that RB1 tier where he's getting more opportunities. It's not like he wasn't getting the lion's share of the carries, because he was. Even though Jalen Warren looks real good. Jalen Warren could take a couple of those carries away from him, but Najee is going to get likely the bulk of the carries next year and be their number 1 back next year. And if they have enough opportunity, they keep getting first downs and stuff, more rushing attempts, more first downs, more rushing attempts, more chances for touchdowns. And he's also a pass catching back. Now, do I think they're going to be like they were a couple of years ago where he's getting the ball dumped down to him 12 times, 14 times a game? Probably not. He's going to come back to earth. I don't think he'll ever get back to that. He's not going to ever get back to maybe a game here or there will have 10 plus targets, but they're not going to be built like that, I don't think. Now, they moved Chase Claypool out of town. They still have some receivers there, so it's not like they're not going to throw the ball. And Kenny Pickett can throw the ball and likes to throw the ball deep. take some chances. But Najee Harris is definitely going to be a part of that game plan. Number 28, we got James Conner. James Conner, every year, the dude beat cancer. He can keep playing, and he not on the best offense, and he's not the best running back. But the dude's chug kind of guy. And that's the kind of guy that I want on my team because he's never going to give up. He's always going to keep pushing. And as long as they give him chances, which I don't see too many reasons why he wouldn't get chances because he's like the only thing there. And a lot of their team was hurt last year. So, again, he's another one of those guys similar to Najee that, like, he could easily get way more opportunity than he did this past year just from the offense being a little bit better and being able to get more first downs and get him more touches and more chances for touchdowns. And Kyler, although he was a running quarterback for a long time and he still has a chance to kind of do that little scamper around the edge and kind of skirt into the end zone, he's not as much of a threat to James Conner's red zone rushing. So James Conner is a guy that I want on my team next year. Again, I think he'll be undervalued. He's getting a little bit older. But it takes a while for the changing of the guard of the running backs. So it's not like, 1 year it's going to be like all James Conner and then, there's a new guy and it's going to be all him. Unless he's like the man, like coming in like you're a Zeke Elliott, you're a Breece Hall, you're a Kenneth Walker. Until those kind of guys come in, and even Kenneth Walker, he needed an injury to really take over. He might not have been the guy till next year, like this year coming up, 2023. But Rashad Penny got injured as he does, as his MO is, and Kenneth Walker took over. Number 27, Dalvin Cook. He's another one of those guys. He's getting old, but it's going to take a while to kind of, like Alexander Madison probably won't be the guy next year. It'll be Dalvin again. And every single time Dalvin goes down, you're going to think he's dead because he falls so hard. And he looks like he's dying every single time he falls. But he gets right back up. He hobbles over to the sideline and then gets 4.5 yards, 5 yards carry on the next time he touches the ball. And he can pass catch. And they're on a super powered offense again. And the NFC North is theirs to lose. I know I think Detroit will get it along with a lot of the other fan base. But Minnesota is a real team. They have a lot of players on their team. They have a lot of, their quarterback is a vet that's been there and is more than capable, at least currently. He's starting to look a little old and a little short arming. He's giving you that Peyton Manning at the end of his career short arm throws, that Tom Brady at the end of his career short arm throws. So Kirk might not have too much longer. I think he'll still be there for another couple years, and I don't think he's on the uber decline yet to where it's going to super affect, players like Dalvin or JJ. So we're going to move on to number 26. Number 26, Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne is another one of those players who, like I said, I expect Jacksonville take a slight step forward, and they're going to be solid. And Travis Etienne, I'm going to try to rush through these last few so I don't make this video too long. But so we got Travis Etienne. He's another super talented back. They got, what's his name? James Robinson out of town, so he's the guy now. I mean, I wouldn't be afraid to take him even a little bit higher than this. I expect Jacksonville to get another step forward. He's a pass-catching and running back. He's got all kinds of skill. I mean, I want him on my team. We'll go with that. And we're going to go into Amon-Ra St. Brown at 25. Amon-Ra St. Brown, this seems a little bit high for me, but he just held, when he's healthy, he was up there with with your top 5, 6 wide receivers pretty much all year. When he ended up getting hurt and he played through it, he played through quite a few games, kind of injured, so not a player that really jumps out at me as being like elite, but he is so good at his craft, and he's got the mentality. Like, if you watched Hard Knocks, they did a little special on his family, and his dad and him and his brother seem to just have such a good head on their shoulders and work ethic, and it really translates onto the field and shows how much he's able to push and how much he's able to do and how much he wants to do. He was only at 6 touchdowns, 11 yards per catch, but the offense is way better. Now, it's a little bit scary with Jameson Williams being there, especially at the end of the year. Jameson started looking decent. Now, what I think it'll do, I think it'll stretch off defenses a little bit out. They won't necessarily be able to key in on Amon-Ra. Now, if he can get the ball in space without having teams key in on him, I think it could open up all kinds of opportunities. Not just for him, but for the entire team. They are going to possibly be one of those very scary teams. Now, I think the one thing that might be holding them back is the Jared Goff. But again, Jared Goff has shown he can do it. I believe he's even won a Super Bowl with the Rams. So, no, did he win one? No, I don't think he did. Been to a Super Bowl with the Rams? Either way, he's good enough. He's good enough to get the ball to the guys who have the talent. And Amon-Ra, he has a chance to be, I'm not going to even say a top 5 wide receiver, but definitely a top 10 wide receiver. I don't think he has a chance to be a top 5 wide receiver next year unless injuries can happen, but without injuries, he's going to be right in that 6 to 10 range as long as he plays up to his abilities. Number 24, Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard stepped up onto the scene this year. This dude, he had 193 carries, not blowing anybody away, but it's solid. He had 55 targets. Again, not really blowing anybody away, but that's solid. No turnovers as a running back. Pretty solid. Another really solid number, 5.2 yards a carry. 9.5 yards a catch. He's playing on Dallas. Dallas is like touchdown machine city. They score so much. There's so many fantasy relevant players. And Tony Pollard, CeeDee Lamb, those are the 2 that you want on your team. Dalton Schultz, he might be out of town, so we'll see. But he was also another player, but a different position and not quite as dominant as those other guys. So Tony Pollard, he's a guy that you're going to want on your team. He could even take a vast step forward in my list. Definitely, he has the ability to be an RB1 next year. He was this past year. He has a chance to even be a little bit higher and a little bit better of an RB1 if Zeke can go out of town at all. If he gets the lion's share of the carries, like he was already getting the lion's share, but if he gets really the uber vast share, he's going to be a scary player. Now this number 23 guy, I was debating having him at, even a little bit lower. I like Tony Pollard better than him. I know that doesn't work the way numbers work, but Jonathan Taylor, he was the number 1 back from a couple of years ago, mostly due to injury, but he was a chug it along kind of guy. Now, Matt Ryan came into town this year. They had some receivers there, Pittman, they have, Paris Campbell, they had Nyheim Hines, who's now in Buffalo, but they had some pieces there. And that's another thing for Jonathan Taylor, Nyheim Hines is out of town, taking those carries out of town. Deion Jackson looked pretty good, but I don't think Deion Jackson's going to take over the Nyheim Hines role specifically. He'll get some spell touches. He'll spell Jonathan Taylor, but they would have specific packages for Nyheim Hines to be like, we want to get him the ball. We're going to have a pass catching play to get the ball into one of our dynamic playmakers' hands. So Jonathan Taylor is a player that he can take he took a step back, and I expect him to go right back. So I'm still high on Jonathan Taylor. I would probably take him higher than 23. I would probably take Tony Pollard higher than 23. But they are guys that I am uber interested in, and I think Tony will actually probably be higher on the ADP than Jonathan Taylor because of last year's performance. But that doesn't mean that it'll guarantee be that way. Also, we'll see what happens with Zeke. We'll see what happens with Indy's quarterback situation, if anything. We'll see what happens with the draft, with all the teams. So we got some time to see what happens. We're going to move on to number 22. Number 22, Patrick Mahomes. He's Patrick Mahomes. And again, I'm going to reiterate, I typically don't take quarterbacks this early in drafts, but this past year, quarterbacks, especially uber elite quarterbacks, the guys who are giving you your 25, 26, 27 fantasy points a game, there was like 5 of them this year. If you didn't have one of those guys, you pretty much didn't make the fantasy playoffs. And it sucked because your whole rest of your team, you could have been doing so good all year, and you just, you went the route of, I'm not going to take one of the super high-powered quarterbacks and I'm going to stack up my team. And then the guy who gets lucky and takes Ramondre and takes some of these other running backs later, and Tony, you got Ramondre and Tony Pollard, you got 2 top 10 backs, and you took them in the 10th and 11th rounds? Those guys, the uber good quarterbacks this year were so important. And Patrick Mahomes, it's either Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. Those two are so close to each other. I'm going to call them interchangeable, but they are the elite of the elite. I would put Jalen Hurts a little bit higher myself, but the rushing ability scares me. He's a little bit along the lines of Lamar Jackson. You run the ball too much, you got to have a higher chance of getting hurt, which is why Josh Allen, I don't know why I got him. I should flip-flop him, but either way. The rushing scares me a little bit. Passing seems to me to have more of a longevity and the lower injury risk. So Patrick Mahomes, I don't think I need to say too much about him. He's my number 22. And our final guy for today's episode, which is going to be another one of our plug picks, that's going to be Amari Cooper. So Amari Cooper, with the move over to the Browns, pretty solid. He played 17 games this year. He caught 78 catches on 132 targets. Not bad. 9 touchdowns, solid, and 15 yards a catch. Very solid numbers. The Browns, though, they are, and probably still will be in the future because they have Nick Chubb and they have Kareem Hunt. They're going to be a run-heavy offense. Now they got Deshaun Jackson there. I think they're trying to almost mimic what Philly has. I mean, not exactly, but they want the all aspects, the scariness from all angles, so you can't really key in on any one thing. You got a quarterback with an arm who can also run. You have uber elite running backs. You have an uber elite wide receiver in Amari Cooper, and you got a solid defense. That's not a team that you want to play against. What do you do against them? Do you force them to run and then you got to have Nick Chubb? Do you force them to throw the ball and now you got to deal with Deshaun Jackson and Amari Cooper? And I know Deshaun didn't look that good last year, but you got to remember he's a little bit removed from the league. Give him a chance to get his feet wet. And once he does, he was an elite quarterback when he was playing. So I don't have any doubts that he can get back to that. It's possible, I guess he doesn't, but I mean, and they paid him a lot, so they're going to be conditioning him and trying to get him back to that point. Now, if Amari Cooper can have an elite Deshaun Jackson throwing him the ball, I don't even know if he's going to need a lot of targets. He might just be fine. Like, he'll be fine. He'll be that close to a touchdown a game, maybe 12 touchdowns on the year, 1,600-yard kind of wide receiver with 7 catches a game. Because you don't need... I was more actually thinking 7 targets a game, not 7 catches a game, but if you're getting the ball downfield and you're able to because he can get the ball downfield and keep running. He might look like a goofy gazelle while he's doing it, but he can keep going. And the dude, he surprised me this year. I really didn't think he was going to be all that good, but he surprised me. And that's going to be our show for the day. This was number 40 through 21 on the top 200 fantasy footballs PPR for the 2023 fantasy football season. I'm signing out. Scott Fenner, Fantasy Football Plug. Y'all have a good night.